Content warning. Check the show notes for more information. It's August 7th, 1970, and another remarkable event is about to be uncovered by Arion, Rebecca, and Olly, the Retrospectors.
The events that unfolded in a California courthouse today in history in 1970 seem like they could have been ripped directly from the cheesiest of blaxploitation movies. The teenage brother of a Black Power activist imprisoned by the man, pulling out a gun in the courtroom and taking the judge hostage in the middle of a trial, even persuading convicts on the stand to join him in this bold but ultimately doomed bid to fight the power.
Yeah, so the teenager in question was Jonathan Peter Jackson. He was the leader of this gang that was intending to basically make a political statement by taking a judge hostage and anyone else who got in their way. He came into Marin County Courthouse wearing a long raincoat, which didn't seem to arouse any suspicions, despite the fact that it was a really hot day and there was absolutely no rain. Inside the raincoat, he had 3 guns, and he initially sat among the crowd before he opened up his satchel and drew out a pistol and tossed it to the defendant on the day, James McLean. And then he pulled out an Ivor Johnson paratrooper-style M1 carbine with a 20-round magazine from his raincoat, and he said to the judge, "Freeze, just freeze."
Yeah, so how was this able to be happening in a California courtroom? Let's just pause for a second and contextualize this. Because 1970 was the absolute height of racial division between white prisoners and black prisoners, but also more specifically white prison guards and black incarcerated people at San Quentin Correctional Facility. Alerts were at an all-time high following an incident earlier that year when 3 black prisoners had been shot dead by white prison officers in a confrontation in the prison yard. The white prisoner also involved in the fracas was injured but not killed. And one particular prisoner, George Jackson, was a communist and had been published. Marlon Brando liked him, Noam Chomsky liked him. And this was a huge challenge to the authorities in Marin County. And as you said, Rebecca, it was his brother who was involved in this sabotage today.
Yeah, Jonathan Jackson's ultimate goal on this day was to kidnap a judge, in this case Judge Harold Haley, who's a 65-year-old judge, and use him as leverage to demand the release of his brother George. But as we've mentioned, this wasn't just because it was his brother and he wanted him out of prison, it was because he was this black activist icon at the time. He had founded a prison gang that was called the Black Guerrilla Family. It was slightly different from a usual prison gang because it was also a Black Power political movement with a revolutionary Marxist ideology. It's actually still a going concern in California prisons. And George had become one of what was called the Soledad Brothers. So after that incident that you mentioned, Olly, where the white prison guard had killed 3 black inmates, the 3 victims were left to bleed out for 20 minutes. They could probably have been saved, but they weren't. The prison guard responsible, who was called O.P. Miller, was cleared of all wrongdoing. This caused the already very tense racial atmosphere to explode. Soon after, a white prison guard called John Mills was seized and thrown to his death from the 3rd floor of the prison by inmates. 3 of them were charged with his murder. One of those was George Jackson. They became known as the Soledad Brothers. This was taking place in Soledad Prison. And they became a real cause célèbre for militant Black Power activists on the outside. And Jonathan was also a member of the group.
Things got very, very tense very quickly.
As they tend to be when you threaten a judge with a gun.
Yeah, that's true. But so guns were thrown basically to anyone who was sympathetic to the cause around the room, including another San Quentin inmate, Rochelle McGee, who was a witness for McLean, who was being tried this day. And then McGee went and freed 3 other prisoners from their holding cells. And after McGee freed him, one of the other Black Panthers, a guy called William Arthur Christmas, joined the other kidnappers as well. So by now we had 4 kidnappers, and they were holding Judge Haley at gunpoint and forced him to call Sheriff Louis P. Mountanos, hoping to dissuade police from getting involved. This was quite unlikely, particularly because the kidnappers had put fake dynamite against Haley's neck. Actually, they were road flares, but they looked quite like dynamite.
Yeah, you do wonder what they genuinely thought might be their exit strategy. The judge, having called the sheriff, had to pass the phone to McLean, who is the guy on trial, who then says down the phone, "Call off your dogs, pig, or we'll kill everyone in the room." I'm not sure what they thought was going to happen, but they really raised the stakes. So, having gone from fake dynamite on the judge, they then fastened a real sawed-off shotgun to his neck with adhesive tape. And tied 4 other hostages with piano wire as they slowly, and I suspect quite terrifyingly, shuffled outside. Albeit they probably thought, we've got a judge with us, we're not going to be fired upon. But actually, the San Quentin policy was never to allow hostages to be used for barter, because that would encourage repeat attacks. So actually, regardless of the fact it's a judge they've got a gun under the neck of, the standard operating procedure for the police is not to stand their pigs down, but to open fire.
And it was a very unpredictable situation too, because it had been made up of Jonathan Jackson, who had actually planned this whole abduction, but also then 3 kind of random people who had also joined him. So it's not like they had a unified plan of exactly what they were going to do. And once they'd ordered everyone to the ground, they actually spent several minutes debating what to do next. And Rochelle McGee, who was a bit of a wild man, he said, let's just kill them all. And then the others were like, well, let's not do that.
This is where it really feels like a Tarantino film. You can imagine that dialogue.
I just imagine Jonathan looking at McGee being like, I kind of wish I hadn't picked you to be one of the accomplices. You're bringing like a whole different level into it. Eventually they agreed that they would take a few hostages with them as well as Judge Haley. They selected the Assistant District Attorney, Gary Thomas, and 3 female jurors. So once they tied them together, they started leading them down the hall. There are incredible photos taken in the courthouse of the kidnappers and their hostages because they wanted it to be publicised. They actively encouraged the journalists there to take photos.
Anyway, almost no sooner had they got outside and marched these hostages into a small van in the parking lot, the police did open fire, and this huge gun battle erupts. I say huge because the effects were devastating. It killed all 3 inmates and Judge Haley, who suffered a shotgun blast to his face from the gun that they'd stapled to his chest. But it was all over in 19 seconds. 4 deaths in 19 seconds.
Yeah, but a blockade of about 100 armed police, deputies, prison guards had already been set up, of course, to intercept them by this time. Both sides shot several...
What, the sheriff didn't stand the pigs down?
Nope, the pigs were there in
Sent
force.
down his dogs?
Nope, absolute herds of pigs waiting for them.
Straightforward request.
Both sides shot several times, as you mentioned. Haley was fatally wounded, but accounts differ as to who fired the fatal bullet. Like, McGee was holding the shotgun, that was taped to his neck, and it did go off and it did basically blast his face off, but he was quite possibly already dead from the barrage of gunfire that had been directed at the van. In the chaos, the Assistant District Attorney Gary Thomas, one of the hostages, was able to grab the revolver out of Jonathan Jackson's hand. He was driving. He emptied the chamber at his captors. He struck several of them. He maybe killed 1 or 2 of them, but he was also hit by bullets from the roadblock. He was shot 3 times. One of them hit his spine and paralyzed him from the waist down. Later on, forensic examination proved that this bullet came from a San Quentin prison guard's rifle, and one of the jurors was wounded in the arm. When the dust settled, Rochelle McGee was the only kidnapper left alive. At this point, he was probably thinking, I was right, we should have just killed them all. He was later charged with murdering Haley, but the chaotic circumstances made it impossible to prove, and he was ultimately only convicted of aggravated kidnapping. As for George Jackson, the guy who started this whole thing, he remained at San Quentin on the adjustment unit where the most dangerous prisoners were kept. Just over a year after this botched abduction, he had just left the prisoner's visitor's room after meeting with his lawyer when the guard escorting him back to his cell noticed something shiny in his afro and told him to remove it, presumably thinking it was a comb or a pen. Instead, he pulled out a 9mm pistol and ordered the guard to open the 34 cells on the unit. As he did, Jackson announced, "Gentlemen, the dragon has come." This was a reference to Ho Chi Minh's quote, "Those who protest injustice are people of true merit. When the prison doors are opened, the real dragon will fly out."
I mean, I doubt the prison officer knew that reference.
Yeah, it was Ho Chi Minh, but it was also undeniably very cool. The prisoners took several guards hostage, 3 guards and 2 white trustees, prisoners with privileges, who were later found dead. One of them had been shot. The others had their throats cut using a shank or were strangled with cord. In this chaos, George Jackson managed to find the keys to the prison yard, and with the pistol still in his hand, he headed out into the yard where he was gunned down from a watchtower. The suspicion is that the weapon had been smuggled in by his lawyer, who claimed his innocence and was later acquitted, but did leave the country for 13 years after this. And that lawyer was Stephen Bingham, grandson of Machu Picchu discoverer Hiram Bingham III.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not see that link to a previous episode coming up.
And so another week of retrospecting ends. But next week begins a day early at Club Retrospectors. Join us now to get an exclusive episode every Sunday. Patreon.com/retrospectors.